In the small fishing community of Gloucester, Massachusetts, on its rocky shores, sits a European-style medieval castle. Who built this castle? What is it used for? And why do so many people claim it's haunted? Join us as we tell the enchanted story of Hammond Castle.
Welcome back to Weirder After Dark, the podcast where we get into everything New England strange. I'm Sean. I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I am Chris.
And I'm Kathy.
What kind of episode we got today, Chris?
It's scary.
Scary. We got a scary episode here today.
I like scary.
But before we get into our scary episode, Chris, you've had some pretty scary things happening at your work lately, right?
There's some strange stuff going on in the security camera. I sent you some videos today. What did you think?
I watched several videos, some orbs, and anyone listening, I'm giving my genuine reaction. Chris and I haven't talked about this yet. I don't believe in the orb shit. I don't know. The orbs do nothing for me, but there were two videos of the strands you sent me that were really, really interesting. One, the whistle. What the hell? I don't know what time was that video shot at?
That was like 5 a.m. And I'll tell you what, I work in a building. And I'm usually the first one in the building at 7:30 in the morning. So maybe somebody was working overnight, but yeah. It sounded like it was right in the room, right?
It did. So just for our listeners here, it's literally just like a camera must be up high somewhere inside of one of the main rooms.
Yep, security camera.
And it's clearly dark. And then all of a sudden you just hear whistling. And maybe we can share that on is that okay? Or like on our Instagram or something like that?
Yeah, I talked to my two business partners. They said absolutely we could share all those videos online. So
yeah, so we'll share that there. You all can kind of be the judge. But Kathy, what was your reaction to it?
Yeah, it was definitely a little creepy.
Yeah.
Watching it and then hearing the whistle. And I don't know how I feel about orbs either.
Yeah.
But the orb one I thought was also kind of weird because you see this thing floating and it's going and then it's just gone. It kind of like traces and then there's nothing there. Yeah. So
that one I thought, well, that's a bug or a speck of dust
until it just disappears
mid-screen.
Yeah.
Where did it go?
It is weird. I just feel like we see so many of those types of videos that to me it's just like, I don't know, there's got to be like some reasonable explanation. But the whistle, and then you had that second one with like the mist.
Yeah.
That's weird. That's strange to me. Like, what would cause a mist like that? And again, we'll throw them all on our Instagram. Feel free to check them out there. But like, it's literally kind of like someone has a fog machine right below the camera, and the fog machine's just drifting all in there. And Chris, I'm assuming there's no fog machine.
No,
otherwise you wouldn't have sent that to me.
A security camera.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
And what's going on there, but I'd love to hear people's feedback and what they think it is. And if anybody can explain it away, that'd be great.
This isn't the first set of weird things that you have that's happened at this place, right? Like you've heard things before, right?
Oh, yeah. Then there's 5 or 6 videos at this point of strange things going on there.
Wow.
You've also had personal experience being there, right? I don't know if you want to share that or not.
No.
No?
Now I'm so interested.
I don't know. I mean,
I heard a voice the other day.
What? But how could you not share this?
My first question was, do you think that's like an audio hallucination? Is there some sort of mental disorder that could be doing this? But he confirmed that disorders like that are usually in the late teens, early 20s, and we're well past that.
I don't think you're crazy, Chris.
Yeah, I don't think he's crazy either.
Well, before we go on, I will edit this portion out. Do you not want to talk about it? Because I don't want to force you.
No, that's cool.
Okay.
No, okay.
Do not edit this out. Yeah, you said no. So I was like, I'm not going to push you. But what did you hear? How could you were withholding this from me?
I walked into work Friday morning. Mm-hmm. Again, the first one there, first one in the building. And somebody said something from the office directly across the room. Yeah, I didn't make out what they said. And I went to go see who was in the office, and nobody was there.
That is so creepy.
And I went and turned on all the lights very quickly.
I don't blame you at all.
It was a little strange. And it's like, your mind tries to make sense of it.
Yeah.
Like, well, the door squeaked, and that sounded like somebody's voice. But I have no idea what it was.
I don't think I've shared this story on the podcast either, but like I've had something very similar to that happen to me. And like, you know me, I'm very much like, I don't think it's ghosts, but I still can't explain it. But at the time, I was over my girlfriend's house, and it's just the two of us. No one else is there. She did live in an apartment at the time, and we were just like washing the dishes, had a nice dinner, hanging out. And then all of a sudden, I could have sworn that I heard her mom's voice say her name, but her mom wasn't there. And like my girlfriend was right next to me. I walked through the entire house, first floor, second floor, no one's there. Went outside, no one's home. No one, like, it's not like they showed up randomly, but like distinctly, it was her voice. And I was like, what is going on? And then I'm not shitting you. 20 minutes later, her mom shows up.
That is weird.
That's strange. I can't explain that.
That makes me feel so much better. That's happened to me like maybe a dozen times.
Really? Yeah.
I remember I was out in the middle of a lake in a kayak and I distinctly heard somebody say, Chris, from right behind me. And I turned around. I was the only one in the lake. It freaked me out a little bit.
Dude.
I paddled very quickly back to the shore.
Same.
Oh, give me goosebumps. Yeah. Yeah, I've had that happen so many times too, where it's like my name, someone I care about's name that I hear. I'm like, what the hell? And a lot of times when it's happening, the spookiest part is like, I'm right in that like state of a lot of times like being awake, but being asleep. Yeah. And like, I'm jolted awake by someone saying my name and I'm like, what? And I'll get up, search the whole house and I'll be alone. And I was like, okay. That's weird.
Dude, that is creepy.
Yeah. It happens not a lot, but a decent amount.
Enough that
I
you've
remember
noticed it and you're like, this isn't the first time it's happened.
Well, for me, it's just like, I don't know. I've just been like, I'm dreaming.
Yeah.
It's a dream and I'm in a weird state and whatever. It's happening.
Yeah, it's easy to discount.
Yeah.
It makes me feel better if somebody else has that. Because I was talking to Kathy. She's like, nope, that never happened to me. Like, oh shit, really?
Yeah, no, I've never had like an audio thing.
Well, Chris, thanks for sharing that. Like you said to the listeners, we'll pull some of those videos on the Instagram. Take a look at them, and maybe Chris, Kathy, like maybe we should go investigate Chris's work.
I was thinking that. Can we do that?
Yeah, I'd be down.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, with that, a spooky opening, Chris, and you got a scary story?
Yeah, well, scary. We're gonna go from a haunted office to a haunted castle, if that's okay with you guys.
I'm in.
So I want to tell you the story of Hammond Castle in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and why this castle is claimed to be haunted. This is one of those stories that the research tells you what the story is. I started out trying to tell a ghost story, and I found a much more interesting story. To understand the claims of being haunted, first we have to understand Hammond Castle's owner and designer, John Hammond Jr. Now, Hammond Jr. was born in San Francisco in 1888 to a British upper-class family. He moved to South Africa in 1893 at the age of 15 when his father, John Hammond Sr., accepted a job operating a gold mine in the British colony of South Africa. Now, in the late 1800s, white dude running a mine in South Africa where labor practices and laws did not exist for black Africans. We can make some assumptions of what kind of man his dad was, and we would be right. Yeah.
Okay.
So he worked for Cecil Rhodes, who was the mine's owner. And Cecil was also the prime minister of the British colony in South Africa where the mine was located. Cecil used his political office to take black Africans' lands using a law he invented called the Glenn Gray Act, then used black African labor under brutal work conditions to strip and mine the land he had just taken from them.
Really nice guy. Sounds like
this guy's kind of an asset.
Yeah. What the fuck, man?
So he also, while in office, tripled the income limits that were required to vote, furthering the barriers for black Africans to vote him out of office and assuring the British colonizers were in control of decisions in the colony. So this guy was a full-blown classic asshat.
Yeah.
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 So during the time Hammond Sr. was operating the mine for Cecil in South Africa, there was a populist uprising by the Reform Committee Party. The Reform Committee Party was a new political party demanding a stable constitution, fair franchise laws, or fair conditions to start a business, so they wanted some basic human rights. This would not be a good thing for Cecil, who was clearly taking advantage of the current system. John Hammond Sr., as the mine operator, helped to put together 1,500 troops to go kill everybody in the Reform Committee Party.
What?
Yes. Like, this is South Africa during the British colonial days. Luckily, he failed. Hammond Sr. was imprisoned and sentenced to 13 years in prison. But don't worry, Cecil, the prime minister, was his boy. So after a week in prison, the sentence was commuted and became a 2,000 British pound fine.
Which I'm sure was not that big of a deal.
Not a huge deal for him, though.
Yeah.
He was also asked to leave the British colony of South Africa. So trying to take out an entire political party ended up in being a fine.
That's
fucked up, right?
That is so messed up.
I mean, I guess at least they had him leave I don't know if that's... No, it's just fucked.
The idea.
I was like, I mean, at least they had him leave. He wasn't there. He couldn't do any harm in that area, but he also didn't pay for the crimes that he did. So.
No justice.
Yeah, zero justice.
Yeah, he does more harm.
It sounds like politics haven't really changed that much.
Yeah, we'll get deeper into Hammond Sr.
Also, the barriers to vote. First off, there's already you have to have a level of wealth in order to vote. And then we're going to triple that. We're going to triple that. Let's go ahead. Come on.
So Hammond Sr. and the family moved back to England for several years. This is where Hammond Jr., still a teenager, fell in love with ancient European architecture and, of course, castles. This was the turn of the century. This was a time of inventions where we saw the first powered flight, radio broadcast, air conditioning, the first laundry machine. The World's Fair was held in England that year. All of this could have played a big influence on young Hammond Jr.
Yeah, and plus castles rule.
And castles are fun.
Castles rule.
Who doesn't love a castle?
We're going to get into castles, guys. Big time castle stuff coming.
Nice.
So after a few years, the family moved back to the United States, where Hammond Sr. accepted a job running a mine on the Colorado-Mexico border. So yes, if your U.S. geography is any good, you will now be asking, why does Chris think Mexico and Colorado share a border? Well, in the late 1890s, it actually did. We were still rearranging the southwestern states, and Colorado had a weird long tail that reached all the way down to the Mexican border. Only 50 years earlier, in the 1840s, these border lines between the U.S. and Mexico were still disputed. By the late 1800s, the U.S. had taken the land, but they were still contested in the minds of many of the Mexican people. So a U.S. mining company, having issues with the native Mexicans, saw what Hammond did in South Africa and thought, this is our guy. Human rights, overrated. We have money to be made. Let's go Hammond.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm embarrassed.
As it turns out, this was not a great hire by the mine because Hammond Sr., after operating the mine for only a few years, put together a financial report that severely overvalued the mine's worth to the London stock market. He then took the money he had invested in the mine, cashed in his stocks, and he bought a new mine in Colorado. This caused a stock bubble in the English stock market and caused a lot of people to lose a lot of money and for the mine itself to go bankrupt. So
something tells me Hammond probably doesn't care, though, right?
So yeah, again,
it doesn't seem like a very considerate guy thinking of others.
Yeah, Hammond did okay.
You got to think of the times, though. It's cutthroat at that point.
I mean,
he's still a douchebag.
Yeah, he's a douchebag.
Yeah, I can also think of some, characters inside of our current society that might operate very similarly, depending on how that goes. But we'll leave that there and move forward.
Hasn't changed all that much.
Yeah.
So what do they say? Those who cannot do, teach. Hammond Sr. then sold.
Is that a dig to you?
Yeah, I feel like it was. Is that I teach, Chris? Is that what that is?
But Chris also teaches.
That's what I did for a living too. So.
Okay. Oh, we cool. We cool.
So Hammond Sr. sold the mine in Colorado and then took a job at Yale University as a professor of mining engineering. At the time, he was good friends with then President Taft, who gave him an ambassadorship to Russia, where his record on human rights could truly be appreciated by his peers with Russia.
What?
He was also friends with President Coolidge, who would consult him on the country's coal reserves and pricing. During this time, he was a regular guest of John D. Rockefeller, the banking tycoon and the richest man in the country at the time. Hammond Sr.'s net worth at the time of his death was $1.2 million. He was featured on the cover of Time magazine in 1926 for the work he'd done in helping build the United States. I just want to mention, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So was that his net worth in what you said? So when he died in 1920?
1926, yes.
That was his net worth. So what would that be worth today?
Oh, I'm thinking close to $1 billion at this point.
A lot of money. He's hanging out with Rockefeller,
he's
Coolidge.
doing
well.
Yeah, he's doing all right.
Got deep pockets.
Here's this horrible person who's cheated and stole and mistreated people, and he's hanging out with presidents and millionaires and being celebrated and never really seeing the consequences of any of his actions. It doesn't feel fair.
No, it doesn't.
So unethical capitalist, to say the least, I tell you this because Hammond Jr., his son, by contrast, was successful in business, but not a savage, take-no-prisoner capitalist like his dad.
Let's go Junior.
Yeah, Junior turns out to be a decent dude.
So he wasn't as successful then?
Well, no.
Yeah.
But a good person.
I would rather be a good person than successful. I mean... I would.
What do we got to say to make this podcast work? Just kidding.
So Hammond Jr., after moving back to the United States from England, attended Yale University and graduated in 1910. With his father's connection and a Yale education, he was offered jobs by Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, and the Rockefellers.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Hammond Jr. decided to take a job as a low-paid patent clerk instead because his life's passion was inventing.
My boy right there, right?
Okay,
He's
he
like,
got all the golden tickets, all the hookups, right? And he said, no, I'm going to become my own man.
I don't
Respect
need
right there, Hammond.
I don't need daddy's network. I'm going to build my own way. I'm doing it my way. Let's go, Junior.
Well, yeah, for now.
Oh, come on, Junior.
Yeah, don't worry about Hammond Jr. He's not exactly struggling. He had serious family wealth and probably never really needed to work to begin with, but respect the fact he wanted to become a self-made man.
Yeah, hustling.
So yeah, Graham Bell and Edison, both family friends, were also mentors to Hammond Jr. and stayed in his life all the way through school and his early career until they passed away. So this guy had all the right connections.
Yeah, so it was okay for him to take like a low-paying, entry-level, nothing job.
Yeah.
He was pretty, I mean, no matter what he did, he was going to be secure for life. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but, you know.
This dude also has like Thomas Edison as a mentor.
Yeah.
Like, who did you guys have as mentors? My guy was a homeless guy. Who was your mentor?
Oh my God, I'm dying.
he drank a lot of natty
Rest in
ice.
peace, Jeff.
Like, learned a lot.
I had an English teacher who was good.
Yeah, I had an English teacher and a truancy officer. I got in trouble a lot when I was in high school.
What is a truancy officer?
So basically, this guy, Mr. Reed.
Shout out, Mr. Reed.
Mr. Reed, yeah. But yeah, he basically would drive around town looking for like, make sure you were at school. And if you were like cutting classes, he would go and make sure that you were in your class. I was a frequent flyer of his. So he would actually like come into my class and like check to make sure I was there. Towards the end of my 4-year career.
Oh, Kathy. So happy you joined us this morning.
Yeah,
that
pretty much. Yeah, like he literally, there were times where he would knock on the classroom door and open up the door. The teacher would have to stop the lesson, and they'd be like, hey, hi, Mr. Reed, and he'd be like, I'm just checking, is Miss Coronity in the class? And there I was, and sitting there, I'm like, hey, Mr. Reed, what's up?
Kathy was one of the cool kids. Me and Sean was sitting in class taking notes.
Yeah.
She was out doing her own thing.
You were not sitting in class taking notes.
I was kind of dumb as a kid. It wasn't until like my junior year in high school that like the brain started operating. It turned on.
I spent a lot of time with you when you were in like middle school and early high school years.
You did. You both did. You guys lived with us.
Yeah, you were not the stellar student.
Yeah.
But when I left, all of a sudden you seemed to like blossom into this student, and then you went to college and
women
did well.
Women are motivators sometimes. Got to be a high value man, Kathy.
Speaking of high valued men, Hammond Jr. left the patent office and started Hammond Radio Research Lab, using his dad's money, building it on his dad's property. So being a self-made man only lasted for a few years. But respect for trying, right? He was a very successful inventor. He held over 800 patents, both foreign and domestic, and was credited with over 400 of his own inventions, many of which we still use today. These inventions are the foundation for all modern radio remote control devices, including modern missile guidance systems, unmanned aerial vehicles or drones, and submarine torpedoes and communication systems. He will later become known as the father of radio control.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's not where I thought that was going. I was thinking of the clicker.
Oh, yeah. He invented the clicker.
I can open my garage door because of this dude.
I can change channels from my couch.
Dad's everywhere. So pleased.
So he also had a lot of non-military inventions, including the TV scrambler. So before this invention, you did not have to pay to get a TV signal. It was just sent out in the airwaves, and if you had a TV and antenna, you could watch any broadcast that reached your antenna. The scrambler only allowed people who paid for the descrambling service to watch the broadcasts.
You fucker.
So yeah, boo that man. No more.
Yeah, you're out. You're out, Junior, man. He's starting like monthly subscriptions. Like,
He also invented a cigarette holder with a built-in lighter, to which I can only say, cool. I don't know how that works, but cool. He also invented the precursor to the modern home stereo system, remote control toys, original altercations to the pipe organ and piano, original cookware, and nautical tools. Now,
This dude's doing everything.
Yeah, he's like got his hands on every aspect of the home.
Yeah.
Now, something I found interesting is he invented 30 different modifications to the pipe organ and piano, but he actually never learned to play.
Huh.
Really? Why?
Good question.
I guess you can't ask.
The pipe organ, I don't know if you know this, but like that's the stuff that they use in churches and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you all seen those?
Yeah.
Those things are
huge.
massive.
Ooh, he's got one in his castle.
I will stop and we will
We
learn.
will get there. It's really kind of cool. But so very successful as an inventor and businessman, and he made a few bucks. He used some of his invention money to start one of his great passions in life, the other half of the story, the estate at Hammond Castle. In 1923, Hammond and the architectural firm of Allen and Cohen started designing his new home, a medieval-style castle on a rocky outcrop on the ocean in Gloucester, Massachusetts. The castle was 171 feet long, 71 feet wide, with a 87-foot high cathedral tower. So we're talking about an actual fucking castle here. The castle boasts a working drawbridge over a moat.
What?
Yeah.
A giant indoor courtyard, atrium area that's all glassed in. The atrium boasts manicured gardens with authentic ancient Roman statues, a 60-foot long pool that's 9 feet deep that was dyed green to make it look more period. The castle was built in a medieval Renaissance style. He imported medieval tombstones from England, and he had them built into the walls of the castles as kind of like pictures, as kind of like wall pieces. It had pieces of actual medieval castles from Transylvania and Romania imported to use into the construction. The castle boasted 20-foot high rock arch windows with original stained glass windows from Christian abbeys and churches in Ireland. The modern wood and rock were beaten and scarred to match the older look of the authentic pieces to make it more like a European castle. The massive front door was taken from a Roman medieval castle. The massive door opened to the Great Hall with 60-foot arch ceilings and massive polished individual boulders made up the floor. He had an English-inspired library with over 200 books and shelves going from floor to ceiling. He had a war room to show off his collection of medieval arms and artifacts. One bedroom was decorated with all authentic medieval European furniture. He also moved his entire radio lab on site.
Hoarding stuff left and right. I also like the idea in my head. I'm sure it didn't go exactly like this, but he's just like, yo, hey, your delivery of the wood you ordered here. And then they're like, yeah, beat it.
Yeah, we need to shit out that. Make it look old.
Such a funny thing.
Yeah. So the castle displayed Hammond's collection of Roman, medieval, and Renaissance artifacts that he had collected. He has on display one of the actual skulls of one of the original crew members from the Christopher Columbus's original voyage to the New World.
What?
Yeah, you can still see it in
the skull?
The actual skull. Yeah, you can still see it today. He also had a child's ancient Roman stone coffin on display indoor atrium. The property boasted French-style gardens, Italian marble statues, Roman bronze statues, and actual suits of armor from medieval European times.
Dang, that's so cool.
The Great Hall contained a massive pipe organ with 7,400 pipes designed by Hammond Jr. himself. The hall ceilings were designed to amplify the sound of the organ. This organ has been used in concerts and by well-known recording artists over the years, so this is truly a statement piece by Hammond. In a letter to his father, Hammond Jr. wrote of his castle, "My ambition is to leave a modest but beautiful museum."
Modest.
It gets worse. I want only an authentic atmosphere, some furniture, some genuine architectural pieces. A place with the romantic beauty of the Italian and French past may prove an inspiration to many poor artists and students to come. I will give them something that I have been fortunate enough to know and enjoy. It also gives me satisfaction to think that I might be able to produce something of lasting worth. So Hammond Jr., humble as fuck, right?
Totally humble.
It's like, yeah, I want poor artists and students to come see my giant castle.
I also he's like, I want it to be beautiful. Give me a couple dead bodies in here.
Yeah. But inside, I mean, he did say, he acknowledged the fact that these were things that he's been privileged to have. I mean, yeah, it's kind of a little fucked up. But at least he was aware that, like, what he had wasn't the norm.
I think from researching Hammond, he grew up in a very different lifestyle, but he seemed like a good dude, even though he made these mistakes of saying, I want to inspire poor people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, his wording could have been better, but
I think he's generally a good dude, right? His inventions today would not win a high school science fair due to the pace of technology changing, but his castle is still a place where thousands of people come to visit. So when he said something of lasting worth, to use his words, I think he probably hit the nail on the head. So I want to ask, if you guys could afford it, would you build a castle today?
Yes.
You would build a castle?
No, I don't think I probably would.
I feel like if I'm living in a residential neighborhood and, you have a raised ranch and, maybe a duplex and then a guy has a castle, I'd feel a little bit awkward.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Something tells me you might not quite relate to your neighbors.
Yeah. And your neighbors might not be so friendly afterwards.
Yeah. It's like, but then again, you have, people doing door-to-door sales, just raise the drawbridge. That would be cool.
I don't think I'd build a castle either, just because, imagine how much dusting you have to do. You'd be cleaning that every day. I have a 1,100 square foot apartment that we're sitting in right now, and this is too much to keep clean. Come on.
I like to think that I would be. I don't know. I think if I had all that money, I'd like to think I would be a good person. I like to think that I would.
You say that like you're not now. If I had money,
I'd be a better person.
Yeah. Well, I think I would. Yeah. I mean, look, I got barely enough money to live my life comfortably, but if I had excess money to build a castle, I'd like to think that I would give it to those around me to help them.
So the construction of this castle in the early 1900s, all in costs, was a whopping $500,000
to build his castle.
Yeah, so inflation, right?
Dog, do you know how much 500 grand gets you today in a house? I know I'm looking, not much.
Not much.
Yeah.
It doesn't even get you a boiler.
So it's just for fun. What do you think the average house price in Gloucester, Massachusetts is today, according to Redfin?
I'd probably say 1.3 million.
Close.
Yeah, 800 grand.
Very close. 810.
Really?
810,000. So for $310,000 more than Hammond spent, you can get a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 1-car garage. So the castle has been the location for many movies and TV shows, including Bewitched and the A&E series on castles, as well as paranormal investigation TV shows.
Ghost Hunters? Ghost Hunters been here?
Yep,
Yeah.
Ghost Hunters has been
really?
here. Taps.
Oh,
Yep.
sick.
It also holds weddings, special events, including a Game of Thrones watch party. Cool. It has regular self-guided tours, and on Halloween it has a haunted night tour.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it did turn into a kind of museum like Hammond had wanted in his lifetime. So that's his castle. A little bit more about its owner. So Hammond Jr. had a bit of a reputation as a playboy. Young and successful, he owned a castle. He was described as handsome and charming by friends. He was in the dating pool of the rich and famous and would often take vacations in Europe for months at a time with actresses and models and spent time in the upper crust of high society. He seemed to really enjoy his time as a bachelor from everything I can find.
So much for that low-paying job.
Yeah. Well, that all kind of changed when he met his future wife, Irene Reynolds. Now, I say kind of because they had an open relationship and both of them saw other people during the marriage. Hammond had a long-term relationship with actress Liesl Buswell. While he was married to Irene, he also had a long-term relationship with Abram Andrews during his marriage. He reported he was sexually attracted to people's personalities, regardless of the gender, so he was pansexual before that term existed. The Hammonds would throw lavish parties in their castle. The guest list would include John D. Rockefeller, composer Noel Coward, and Walt Disney, who did a private screening of Fantasia at the castle before it was released in the movie theater. George Gershwin, the famous composer that the piano is named after, the Gershwin piano, would play the custom organ at some of their parties. So this was a who's who of the rich, artistic, and famous, and they were kind of regulars at the Hammond estate. Now, Hammond Jr. had jokes. He was rumored to use the secret passageways in the house and appear in guest room late at night and ask, "What do you think of my castle?" Startling the guests.
Spooky.
Yeah, a little strange.
Like, hey, get the fuck up.
Just
Hammond, I'm trying to go to bed.
Is that who I'm hearing when I wake up in the morning? No. What do you think of my castle, Sean?
Do you like my castle? Is it big and strong?
He also had an indoor rainforest garden in the castle, and he would soak guests with steam and rain from hidden pipes that he used to water the tropical plants as they walked through the indoor rainforest. So he was described as a fun-loving prankster by friends. So the Hammonds, they were living it up at this point, right?
Yeah, sounds like it.
In 1925, John Hammond Jr. married the love of his life, Irene Reynolds. Irene was a childhood actress. When she met Hammond Jr., she was a divorced socialite and a devout spiritualist. She was never really accepted by Hammond Jr.'s family, but by all accounts I found, the Hammonds were happily married and deeply in love.
Aww.
Yeah, she would regularly host mediums and psychics and would communicate with the dead who she believed resided in the castle. She practiced in the occult and witchcraft and mediumship, as did her husband. Now, scientist and spiritualist, this sounds like a weird match, but it might not be as strange as it might sound today. So Irene was part of the spiritualist movement in the early 1900s. These kinds of practices and beliefs in psychics and mediums were much more accepted and much less fringe at the time. Spiritualism was common and openly practiced in the 18 and 1900s. In fact, in 1850s, Abraham Lincoln and his wife, Mary Todd, would have a medium come to the White House to talk to their son who died of typhoid fever at 11 years old. They would hold seances in the Red Room of the White House, and Lincoln would regularly attend. He was also rumored to have consulted a medium when making difficult decisions about the country and the affairs of state. Could you picture modern presidents having a medium at the White House?
Not admitting it.
I don't know. Mr. President, what are your thoughts on using military force in Gaza? Well, thank you for the question. We're not taking anything off the table, and I got to consult my generals and my psychic medium before I make any final decisions, right? I can see that. Spiritualists believe the individual's consciousness or awareness not only persists after death, but continues to evolve and become wiser in death. In fact, Sid Banks, author and philosopher who claimed to have his own near-death experience, believes when you die, the illusion of death, time, space, and matter is lifted from you, and you automatically become enlightened, because the veil of the illusion of reality has been lifted from you and you can see beyond time and space. Lots of the information I found on spiritualism in the early 1900s called it a social religious practice, though not quite a church or religion, but not just a social gathering or club either. Spiritualism's roots are thought to have started in Africa, where Africans would call on their ancestors to answer tough questions or provide guidance. This practice in Africa predates Christianity and Islam, and its roots might go much, much further back. We don't know. The practice predates the written word, so we don't know who started it or when. We do know that the ancient Egyptians practiced mediumship, as did the ancient Greeks. We know Napoleon III and the Russian Tsar Alexander II both relied on mediums to plan out matters of state. There are stories of mediumship in the Old Testament with the King Solomon and the rich witch of Delphi. So mediumship's a much bigger part of our history than we might think of today. Spiritualism was, at the time, more of a scientific, religious field of study than we consider it today. In fact, the start of the modern practice was credited to Emanuel Swedenborg of Sweden. He has been called the father of spiritualism movement. He was a scientist, inventor, theologian, and mystic who wrote several books on the subject. So these practices' modern roots are largely based in science and Christianity, and not in devil worship or witchcraft like many believe today. Practitioners believe that when people pass on, they are still able to communicate with the living, but also have access to a higher realm of knowledge and are closer to God. Having this access to a higher knowledge, the spirits will at times work as guides to the living using mediums to communicate. In my research on mediumship and psychics, this practice is compared to singing in the shower, right? Meaning anybody can do it, just some people are really good at it. So we are all mediums, just some are better than others. So think of spirits as having access to all time at once and existing outside of space and matter. They could tell you about the future in the same way I could tell you about the weather outside right now. This information would be invaluable to the living and ordinary to people in the spirit world. Also, the ability to talk to loved ones who have passed away, know that they're okay, continue to have deceased loved ones in our lives. We can see why these practices are so powerful for its practitioners and believers. Edgar Cayce, the famous psychic and medium from the United States from the time of Hammond Jr., was actually credited with the prediction of the stock market crash that preceded the Great Depression. Now, by all counts, Mr. Cayce was a simple man, did not follow the markets. One of his followers he did a reading for was an investor who took his advice and sold all the stock he had about a month before the crash. After a few weeks of seeing stock prices increase, he then bought back into the market and a week later lost everything, as did most investors in the stock market crash. Also, in the mid-1800s, we started using cameras regularly. So some images seem to capture ghostly apparitions. Today we would say it's just an overexposure or a shutter speed issue, but regular people were capturing ghostly images and photos. So in the practice of mediumship, some spirits are claimed to no longer be human spirits. This belief borrows from the Hindu beliefs about karma. Now, karma is not just what you put out into the world you get back. Rather, it's the belief you are reincarnated over and over again. And you are put through different lessons until you reach enlightenment. And then you become universal energy, or you know the universe at its whole. These spirits are more revered, but they're also less likely to help you with day-to-day life decisions, according to one revered medium of this time, E.W. Wells. So we have different levels of spirits that people communicate with. So E.W. Wells was of the opinion that communicating with spirits guides for life advice was disrespectful and disempowering and ripe for fraud. He believed asking for help in this lifetime was doing the practice of mediumship a disservice. As it turns out, he was right, or psychic, if you will, because lots of people today see mediums as scams or con artists, and not part of a scientific field or part of a religious belief system, as many did in the early 1900s.
So he's like, it's possible. Mediumship is real, but you shouldn't use it to take advice. You're disrespecting the spirits by doing that.
Yeah, disrespecting the field. The field. Right? Because if I told you about your future for financial gain, then I could expect something in return. So it was ripe for fraud, I guess.
Yeah. But he thinks you can do it.
Oh, yeah. He believed it was true. Absolutely.
So basically, you should only be trying to contact the other side if it's for an emotional purpose.
Yeah. Emotional purpose for higher wisdom, maybe higher guidance. But should I invest in this stock or this stock? He saw that as ripe for fraud and seeing it as hurting his field of work as a medium.
See, but at the same time, I get that and I respect that. That's so cool. But at the same time, it's also hey, using it in ways that you could actually prove that this is real. That's disrespectful to the field, man. Focus on the emotional aspects of this. Right. Don't focus on the things that actually could have scientific backing.
Or to say that you're using it to get wisdom. Well, if you're getting wisdom, can you apply that to gain financial wealth? If it's I don't know, it seems like there's
I think what he was trying to point out was that people are going to use this to rip people off, and it's going to do more harm to his field, which he believes was real.
Totally. Makes sense.
In 1882...
Your mom was born. No, sorry.
Thank you, Kathy.
Burn.
I'm leaving that in, and she's going to hear that. In 1882... the Society for Psychical Research was founded in the UK. It boasted Nobel Prize-winning scientists and conducted deep scientific research into the practices and cases of mediumship and psychic abilities. These were the people who could prove one way or the other the truth about mediumship. While the research was often inconclusive in the early stages, there were a lot of cases the scientists believed were actual accounts of mediumship, and they could not explain away in their scientific opinion. Around the same time, there were also some high-profile fraud cases. Mina Cranton of Boston, Massachusetts, medium popular in the 1920s, was caught using tricks to simulate spiritual contact, including using a telescopic finger made of animal livers to simulate spirits touching paying customers.
Yeah, what?
Yeah. So there's some fraud going on in this world, which was what E.W. Wells was saying. The Fox sisters, who were world known for their ability to talk to the dead, got into a family argument, and one of the sisters outed their abilities as fraud. She recanted this later, but the claims of fraud stuck.
I've heard of those sisters. They were apparently really big, would travel around.
They were all over Europe, the United States. Yeah, they were world known, and they apparently got into a bad argument, and one of the sisters said, "This is all made up."
Why would she do that, though?
I don't know.
I mean, other than maybe, I feel like if you're making that much money and you have a good thing going, even if you're mad at your sister and you're we're not going to do it together, she still could have.
I don't recall all the details, but I've heard this story about them before. And I think there was a lot of pressure and people were investigating them and trying to prove that they were fraudulent and it wasn't real.
Yeah.
So maybe it was an effort to just come clean and to do all that after trying to convince the sister. One sister might not have wanted to do it. Don't fact check me on that.
Yeah.
I do know that after this, a couple weeks later, she tried to recant the whole story and say, I made that part up. This is actually real. But at that point, nobody believed her. So this and some other fraud cases seem to get more attention than the unexplained or even scientific evidence for psychic mediumship cases. With the uncovering of fraud in the field, this pursuit promptly fell out of favor with scientific investigation, and the Society for Psychical Research disbanded. Any respectable scientist would have been shunned by the scientific community for further research, and they kind of closed the books on it at that point. I think being scammed hits our ego hard. We think of ourselves as clever and worldly. I think the idea that we could have been falling for a scam was enough for most people to turn their back on the practice and field of research as a whole. I think modern science is slowly starting to reopen the case for psychic and mediumship today. PhD and author Dean Radin, in his book Real Magic, published in 2018, takes a statistical approach to the subject. Radin, working with statisticians, took some psychic predictions, and they literally did the math to calculate the odds that the prediction was strictly being a guess or by chance. In some cases, the odds were over 1 billion to 1. I found that interesting. Recent Gallup poll done on people who believe and don't believe in psychic abilities found no significant difference in education or social economic status between believers and non-believers, kind of clearing up the misnomer that this is something the uneducated or desperate favor or attached to. Modern day EKGs have been performed on psychics, showing part of the left frontal lobe having less activity during readings. Interestingly, this is the part of the brain we believe that creates the idea of self, or where the identity or ego is constructed, suggesting to be in touch with your sixth sense, you have to abandon your ideas of separation between you and the universe, or the idea of self altogether. The same results have been found in EKGs of people during deep meditation. Now, interestingly enough, deep meditation is a tool a lot of mediums and psychics use to connect to their psychic abilities. But this way predates these EKG findings. Another very recent study out of MIT studied the coin flip. This study has not been peer-reviewed or replicated yet, so keep that in mind. But it was MIT. It wasn't exactly a backwoods university. In the study, they asked the person flipping the coin to call heads or tails. They flipped the coin literally millions of times. Over this number of flips, the odds should have been almost dead even if left up just to chance. They found that the called side of the coin landed 56% of the time, suggesting we somehow play a role in the coin's eventual outcome. The American Psychiatric Association has at least given the nod to mediumship as a tool for dealing with grief or loss. They refuse to weigh in on whether it's real or not. So maybe we are slowly starting to open this field to study back up. Now, Hammond Jr., being an inventor himself and working with the radio waves or invisible energy that sends messages across great distances, he would kind of be the right person to explain the science of mediumship. His wife being a devout spiritualist and him being a scientist and inventor in the early 1900s, this seemed to fit the times. We might see it as eccentric today, but Hammond Jr. tried to apply the scientific method to mediumship and psychic abilities. So the Hammonds conducted a series of experiments in 1941 to 1942. One experiment used the Faraday cage and a famous medium psychic of her day, Aline Garnett. The research team at times included friend and fellow scientist and inventor Nikola Tesla, who invented the Faraday cage. During the experiments, Hammond placed Garnett in the Faraday cage, a cage designed to keep out electromagnetic waves, to determine whether ESP used electromagnetic frequencies as a wave carrier. The experiment concluded she was able to receive psychic messages while in the cage. Messages did not transfer through electromagnetic waves.
So is that kind of like when they say like if you're near like a fuse box, there's a lot of like electromagnetic waves that are coming in, like people can get sensations of like their like hair standing up on their arms and feeling uncomfortable or uneasy.
So what Nikola Tesla and Hammond were trying to determine is whether psychic messages were sent through electromagnetic waves. Now, the Faraday cage made sure there was absolutely no electromagnetic waves getting inside the cage. Her being able to continue to receive psychic messages meant for them that it was not carried using electromagnetic waves. So that's what they were able to conclude.
Okay.
As an example to this right here, I just got up and walked away, and you guys are probably like, where the hell is he going?
I was like, what is he doing?
This is a Faraday bag, but I just bought a brand new Jeep. And apparently what's happening is key fobs.
Yeah.
They let off a signal. Every car nowadays has like the push to start. What people are doing to rob cars is they have these like electromagnetic like enhancing devices that they'll hold up near your door. So even if your key fob is inside your house, it picks up the signal, amplifies the signal, and your car just starts without it. So they have these Faraday bags that you go ahead and you put your keys in to stop the electronic signal from being able to escape and get out of it and allow your car to start.
Oh.
So yeah. So I was like,
what I want you to do is put that over your head and see if you can receive any psychic messages from me.
So good. So good.
But that's cool. I didn't know they sold those.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was a thing that people were doing.
This is all assuming like, okay, you are now in this Faraday cage where electromagnetic signals cannot come in. Oh my gosh, she's still getting signal. It's like, it's assuming it's real.
Right.
Like,
it's assuming it's real
Yeah.
when they're not carrying. But yeah, this was the experiments and studies that Hammond and Nikola Tesla were conducting at the time. So rumors have it the stone floor at Hammond Castle and the Great Hall were somehow discolored or darkened by these experiments. This led researchers to theorize that psychic energy changes the property of the minerals in the rock floor. I don't know, but I know you can still see the discoloration in the floor if you visit the castle today. So some interesting experiments they were doing. And this guy is a serious scientist. He's got a lot of very important inventions over the time. And for him to be looking into this is interesting. I would love your thoughts on mediumship or psychics or even premonitions.
I have gone to so many psychics, probably like 9, 10, 11 at this point in time in my life, just because like I find the idea so fascinating. And I think when like we grew up, Kathy, like our parents and our families were just really big believers in like tarot cards.
They had them.
They had them. They
used to do their own like readings and stuff.
Daily, right?
Yeah.
So like we grew up this like slightly ingrained culture that this was real and you could look to this for guidance and for help. But I've always been a skeptic. So I've always been trying to go to psychics and stuff just to be like, I don't know, feel it out. Like, what do I think and what do I believe? And I honestly think I've had a few moments that have made me go, huh? But more often than not, I'd say like 98% of the time, I'm there just being like, these are just like what I feel is cold reading.
Yeah.
And it doesn't truly feel real to me.
It's hard because there is so much fraud out there.
Yeah.
There is so many people that are making these claims to make a quick buck that if it was real, it's very hard to even unravel.
I've been some readings where that, you know, like you said, like the cold readings where they're so off. I can't even put my own interpretation on it to make it apply to my life.
Yeah.
But then I've gone to others where there's been things that have been a little too on point with things that they've said.
Yeah.
Where I've kind of had to sit back and kind of be like, maybe there's something there.
True.
I don't know. I always go into them kind of hoping, I think.
That alone, though, that sentence is like real and so much power exists just because you want it to be,
To be true. Yeah.
I want it to be true, but at the same time, because I want it to be true, I'm very skeptical.
I don't know if we've talked about this in the podcast. Did we talk about our Montana psychic?
I don't know if we did or not.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I mean, we don't have to spend too much time here. I know we're getting towards the end of the story, but like we did visit a psychic and like there were some moments inside there and we don't all have to share if we don't want to, or you can feel free. But like I remember 2 things that stood out. Like I'm not going to get into one of them, but one of them, she did call something out specifically about my life and a situation that is, and just like that. And I was like, oh, that is like, how did
it's a little too close.
It was like on point. I was like, interesting. But at the same time, in like her next breath, she was also like, someone close to you is a police officer. And I was like, nope. She's just like, but I see a badge. There's someone with a badge. And I was like, no. It's like not a single person like anywhere in my life that has anything to do with that. So I was like, wow, you could have had me. Maybe in like
you were so close to being convinced.
Yeah.
I think for me, she was probably the one that I walked away feeling, is this possibly real?
Yeah.
Because she did. She hit, like, I thought it kind of made me laugh when I first walked in. When we first got there, I walked in, I was by myself, and she was sort of like just making small talk, and we were going to her table, and I was very like kind of quiet, very controlled. And we sat down, and as soon as we sat down, she was just like, you are very busy. She's like, I want you to just slow your mind down. She's like, your mind is always going. She's like, I want you to work on just slowing your thoughts down. She's like, everything about you is very intense. And I was like, yes, that's accurate.
Imagine me as like Morgan Freeman as a narrator, and the thoughts never did slow down.
They never did. It's very true.
10 years later.
High level. So it sounds like you feel like that particular individual for you is probably the closest real experience you've had for a psychic.
Yeah.
And then Chris, high level, or share as much detail as you want to. Like,
So, yeah, I don't know. One thing I can tell you for sure is that we all get premonitions. We get sixth senses. We've all had strange things happen. You're thinking about somebody you haven't seen in 6 months, and all of a sudden you see him on the street, right? And you want to dismiss it as coincidence, but you add those up over a period of time and they get harder to dismiss, right?
yeah.
I have a weird thing where we have a friend, and every now and again, like we'll go months without talking, and then, you know, I'll like reach out to her and she's like, I was literally just thinking about you. Or I'll get a text message from her and I'm like, you've literally have been on my brain for the last like day and a half. I keep meaning to like reach out to you. And it's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe she's just blowing sunshine up my ass, like, you know, saying that.
I am always thinking of you.
Most people are. But it's weird that me and her that happens a lot, I think, between us.
So if we go back to my research into psychic and mediumship being something that some people are good at and some people aren't, well, I can run the 400-yard dash. If I practice it every day, I would get faster. I would never be an Olympic runner, right?
Yeah.
So maybe some people have more access to these premonitions, if you will.
I could see that making sense. I mean, like, I think like if we are saying, let's just live in a world that premonitions or psychics and that power is real. Yeah, there's going to be some people who are just a lot more skilled and talented at tapping into that than others. And I could totally buy that.
Yeah, I have a friend, I think it's okay that I say her name, Liz, who's very deep into this. She believes in the chakras, being able to meditate people into seeing their past lives and things like that. And I've shared stories with her where she believes that I have some sort of a psychic ability. And I don't know if I believe it or not. I don't know how.
Which?
Yeah. I don't know how much I go into that, but I have recently been kind of like, all right, well, let's see like where this goes. I feel like I would be a powerful witch.
Oh, man.
Irene Hammond died in 1959 of natural causes. Hammond Jr. lived and worked in the castle until 1965 when he passed away of natural causes. It is rumored Hammond continued to use and work on his experiments to contact his late wife for the 6 years she was gone until he joined her in the afterlife.
Aw.
So yeah, true romantic to the end, right? Hammond has our heart, right? I started out to tell a ghost story and it turns out to be a love story.
Aw. Aw.
Now, there are claims that the Hammond continue to visit the castle regularly and will make their presence known to mediums and paranormal investigators. Groups such as TV's Taps and Ghost Hunters, as well as mediums and psychics, continue to visit the castle and investigate the paranormal today. The groups claim to interact with the Hammonds regularly, but also much older spirits that are attached to the relics of the old world artifacts that the Hammonds collected over the years. So is the castle haunted? Kathy and I actually visited Hammond Castle a while back. We did not know the history or the claims of the paranormal at the time, but we did have a strange experiment.
Really?
Yeah. So when we went, we were just kind of like, oh, it's like this cool castle. But when we were there was like this little room type thing that we were in, and it kind of like overlooked the hall.
Overlooking the Great Hall.
Yeah. We were standing there, and all of a sudden we could hear the organ, like clear as day, heard the organ being played. So we looked, but there was nothing there. And there were people walking around, nobody reacting to it other than Chris and I going, where did that come from?
Yeah, we both heard it and tried to figure out somebody was playing the organ that said don't touch on it. Like, who is it?
It definitely was kind of weird. And it wasn't until years later when we were watching Ghost Hunters, because our daughter was huge into that. And so we were like watching it. And one of the claims on the show is they said that people would claim to hear the organ playing.
Yeah, that was the part that made it really weird.
Yeah, it was really strange.
So cool.
Yeah, it was really strange. And the organ is like roped off, so you can't go near it. You can't touch it. None of that. But clear as day, like I still like now I'm like, I heard the organ being played.
Yeah, we both heard it because we've It's not like one of us heard and the other one said, you didn't hear that?
Yeah, no, we
Was it
both
like
heard
an
it.
extended period of time or a couple notes? Or
Couple notes.
Couple notes.
Yeah, a couple notes. And I mean, it was quick, but it was a couple notes, but it was very clear.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Chris, like, I know you super skeptic when it comes to this stuff. When you saw that, what were you feeling in the moment? Like,
I don't know how to explain that. Again, I want to try to dismiss it. I just can't yet.
yeah.
And I think too, you have to remember, because this is going to make us sound really old too. It was 20 something years ago. So we didn't have iPhones. Maybe somebody had a recording of an organ that they were playing like on a little handheld recorder.
Probably not though.
But yeah, I mean, what are the chances of that? We didn't have iPhones, so it wasn't like you could play the sound of an organ. I mean, we had like flip phones still back then.
And with it being a museum, I've never been, like, it doesn't have like, do you know how some museums will have like displays, you press a button and they didn't have stuff like that there.
No, nothing like that.
No.
And again, it's one of those things that you just easily dismiss unless you're truly looking for something paranormal to happen, unless you believe in something like that's real. So that's the story of John Hammond, his castle, and why it claims to be visited by spirits. As I said in the beginning, I set out to tell a ghost story and ended up telling a story about a man, his castle, politics, greed, the spiritual movement, and it ended up telling a love story at the end. So they still sell tickets there. You can still do self-guided tours of the castle and the grounds. I would love to go check it out and see if we can have another paranormal experience. I strongly recommend our listeners, if they got an afternoon, it's a beautiful place.
The descriptions of when you were talking about like the skull and the coffin and the garden and all of that. I mean, being outside, it's really a beautiful place, even if you don't have any experience. But if you're just into kind of going to cool places, this place is worth going to go see.
I'll be honest, when I first like heard a little bit about like the Hammond Castle, I was like, why are we doing a podcast episode on this? It's like, hey, wait, you said no one died there? Okay.
You're like, all right, it's like castle.
Like, but now I'm like, I kind of want to check this place out.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of want to, like, I now have, like, hope that, I might have an experience if I go see something like this. So, well-told story, Chris. That was really cool. Thank you for taking us on the journey.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the research of this one. And it just, one of those stories that it kind of, the research told you what the story is supposed to be. And I was just along for the ride.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, listeners, I hope you enjoyed this story that Chris shared with us on the Hammond Castle. If you want to see some more pictures or see any of the resources or information that Chris found when he dug it up, you know where to find that at. You're going to visit it on our Instagram at Weirder After Dark. While you're on there, feel free to like, subscribe, follow. Same thing right to these podcasts. Go ahead and do that. You know, it's helping us allow to bring you more content. And while we're talking about us bringing you more content, you're cool. We're cool. You know some more cool people, so share this shit, all right? Get it out there. We'd appreciate it more than anything. And lastly, as always, you know it gets weirder after dark.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks, guys.